Okay, in these two videos here, I'm just going to give you a rundown of a whole range of evaluation type questions and how you might be able to apply some of the knowledge from these evaluation type questions to questions throughout your exam. So just with the first question, this is the question we looked at in class. So when we're evaluating the relative strengths and weaknesses of budgetary policy, supply side policy and monetary policy in achieving the goal of full employment. So for an 8-mark question, you firstly define the goal of full employment with links to the fact that it's the maximum rate of unemployment, generally 4 to 5% with no cyclical unemployment and without causing inflationary pressures. Then you've got to talk about the strengths and weaknesses of each policy. So when you're analysing budgetary policy, some of the key things you'd want to focus on when you're linking it to full employment is that they can target particular areas of weakness. So budgetary policy through the youth unemployment program, Youth Jobs Path can target young people that are particularly vulnerable because of a lack of skills, or they can target older people through subsidies. So your key policy for budgetary is they can target particular sectors of the economy. The other thing is it has a short impact lag, so they can quickly work to boost demand and create employment if there are issues with a lack of demand in the economy. In terms of weaknesses, the two things that I'd be focusing on is that one, there's an implementation lag, so it can take a long time to get through the House of Reps and the Senate, particularly things like infrastructure spending that has negative implications on people, perhaps through losing their property and things like that. There are also fiscal constraints at the moment because of the high level of government debt, which makes it hard for them to be expansionary and try and promote jobs. It can conflict with other goals, but there's probably not enough time to go through both of those. So they would be your main focuses for budgetary policy. In terms of monetary policy, it has a short implementation lag and it's not subject to political bias, so they're always going to do what's in the best interest of the economy. But the main one I'd be focusing on is that monetary policy has no fiscal constraints at the moment. So the government, unlike budgetary policy who have a lack of government funds, there is no lack of funds with monetary policy. They do have the money. They don't need money to stimulate monetary policy. They just lower interest rates through lowering the cash rate. In terms of weaknesses, the key things I'd be focusing on are the fact that it's ineffective at targeting particular sectors of the economy because it's a blunt instrument. And the fact that at the moment the biggest weakness for stimulating growth is the fact that one, the banks aren't passing on the rate cuts, and two, the fact that people are choosing to use those rate cuts to deleverage and reduce the amount of debt they're in rather than spending on other goods and services. Supply side policies, again, to round out your answer, you need to be really specific with your choice of supply side policies. The good thing is that they can target employment without hurting the other goals. So a lot of policies can reduce cost push inflationary pressures and create jobs through making us more productive and more competitive, which is really good because it boosts growth and employment without hurting the other economic goals like inflation. The other thing it can do is supply side policies can target structural issues within the economy. So they have the advantage of being able to, target particular problems, whether that's, a high minimum wage, whether it's workers being unproductive because their wages aren't really tied to their productivity. So through the implementation of enterprise bargaining and other agreements designed to boost productivity, they're able to target structural issues or ongoing issues with the economy. In terms of weaknesses, you could talk about the fact that some policies increase unemployment in the short term. So things like immigration and childcare subsidies, stuff like that can mean to more competition for jobs. The other main ones I'll be focusing on is the fact that they both have long implementation and long impact lags, and that makes it really hard for them to act in a stabilisation manner because it takes a long time for policies to have their full effect on the economy. They are probably the main things I'd be focusing on in that answer. In regards to other evaluation questions, and we'll talk about some of this in this video and some in the next video, you need to be able to analyse the effectiveness of a particular budgetary policy initiative and how it can achieve the goal. So you need to have a couple in mind, whether it's infrastructure spending, lower income taxes, lower company taxes, and you need to be able to talk about the strengths and weaknesses of that policy. So how would it work in theory? What are the benefits in theory? And then what are some of the potential weaknesses of that policy? So if you're looking at income taxes, and I'll do this quite quickly because I did go through it in the other video, you need to be able to define the goal of full employment at the start of your answer, one budgetary policy to target full employment would be lower income tax rates. Then you need to talk about the benefits of lower income tax rates for growth. So one, it leads to increased disposable incomes, that leads to increased aggregate demand, and that should lead on to increased spending and therefore increase real GDP. This should increase the demand for labour, increasing employment and reducing the rate of unemployment towards the goal of full employment. In addition, lower income taxes can have supply-side benefits. They provide great incentive for individuals to work harder, which can boost productivity, and they can also lead to increased international competitiveness, which further creates more aggregate demand and employment. In terms of the negatives, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing, I'm just going to focus on them because it's really about being able to think of a whole range of different negatives. But one might be the lengthy time lags between the announcing the policy and having its ultimate effect, particularly with the long implementation lags. That can make the policies more pro-cyclical by the time they come about. Other things might be that lower tax rates can lead to a budget deficit. And when we have a budget deficit, that can lead to crowding out, so it can lead to higher interest rates. So the problem is that budget deficits can lead to higher interest rates because there's more demand for banks' funds, and therefore that can lead to problems because it causes lower consumer spending and higher exchange rates. So one problem is the impact lag and the implementation lag. The next one is it can lead to crowding out. Other problems with income taxes, so as I said, crowding out can lead to reduced consumption and investment. Other things might be there's no guarantee that households or businesses will spend the additional disposable income, particularly if confidence is really low. There's also the possibility that underemployment will just reduce. So businesses, there'll be more demand for goods and services, but firms will just increase their existing workers' hours as opposed to hiring more people. All of these are shortcomings associated with lower tax rates, which may make it harder to achieve the goal in full employment. So in your answer, you've talked about underemployment increasing instead, consumers and businesses not increasing their spending when they get the tax cut, crowding out, and we've talked about the long implementation lag associated with the policy, as well as summarising all the key benefits of that policy for growth. We'll talk about a few other ones in the next video.